Okay. Hi, you're listening to the Lead Stories podcast, where we believe that everyone has influence.
And those who are intentional with their influence are leaders. I'm Pastor Steph.
And I'm Jo Saxton.
Welcome to Season 7.
Season 7. My goodness.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
However, there's probably some people where this is the first season for them.
Yeah.
So welcome those of you. Every time I think we start a new season, there's some new folks that come around and
Good point.
connect.
Good point.
And we're so glad that you're here.
Yeah, welcome to our time together. We're going to get to know each other well.
So if you're new to the podcast, then this won't seem that different to you. But for those of you who have been with us for the last couple of years, almost 3 years,
Yeah.
we have launched our YouTube channel.
Finally.
It does seem a little bit like
Welcome to the millennia that everybody else has been in for ages.
2019.
Woo!
So if you are someone who enjoys being able to see the people who are podcasting, you can check out our YouTube channel. So hello, we'll wave at those people. Hi.
This is going to make us a whole lot more accountable about
What we wear the days.
clothes,
Hair.
makeup, everything.
Some
This
days.
was effort, folks.
Some days
Awkward.
the audio may not have represented our reality,
No. It always represented our vocal reality and our hearts.
but sometimes
But
we
not
were wearing.
our appearance.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
not our appearance. Sometimes it was like,
It wasn't exactly pajamas,
but it could have been.
but that's because you wear them to bed even though they're not pajamas.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Anyway.
Well, let's. What do you think about maybe doing a quick introduction of ourselves for the people who maybe are
Joining
here,
us from
Yeah.
around the world. Welcome. It's good to have you.
I hope that there's some people here from Australia for the first time because I know you headed there, and
Yes.
the time that you've had in Australia has been awesome over the years.
Greetings
So we
to
know
the
there's
awesome
already
people.
some
Yeah.
awesome Aussies, but maybe there's some more.
Yeah. Greetings to Melbourne,
Greetings.
Sydney, and Adelaide.
We're so glad.
Yay.
We hope that you're here. So yes, let's do some introductions. So do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to introduce you?
I'm intrigued for how you will introduce me, so I'm going to just remember what goes around does return.
Good point.
Here we go.
I feel like if people often say they feel like they're sitting in the room with us.
Yes.
And so if you do feel like you're sitting in the room and you ever vocally respond to us, I think that's awesome. Even though we can't hear you, I appreciate that. And so I'm sure there were some people who were like voting, yes, introduce each other. That will be funny.
Okay. You first.
So I don't know if it'll be funny or not, but we can try.
Yeah.
Well, Jo Saxton, my partner in podcast crime. I sometimes call you that behind your back.
That's all right.
Like
my
my partner in podcast crime. I don't think we've committed any crimes, but it sounds really edgy.
No.
It sounds edgy.
That's our goal.
Co-host and co-producer of the Lead Stories podcast and Lead Stories Media, and also speaker, author, wonderful mom
Oh,
of two
I-
teenagers. You're about to have two teenagers. You're about to have two teenagers. And mentor, coach, leader extraordinaire. That's what I'm going to call you. I think we met because you were doing some leadership coaching and didn't
Gosh, that
even
was a
live
while.
here in Minnesota.
I didn't.
And so when I think of you, my first thought is not necessarily speaker or author. It's intentional investment in other leaders. That's what you did with me. So I appreciate
thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was great to connect online, and then you somehow God plopped
Rocked
you.
up.
God plopped you right here in
It
my
was the
backyard.
state fair and the Honeycrisp apples that did it.
Yes, come to Minnesota,
Praise
people.
God.
Come to Minnesota. Oh, and we're in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
For anybody who's new, Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We live maybe 15 minutes from each other.
Yeah.
And we record here most of the time. Sometimes we record on the road, but here we are. So that's my
Yeah.
introduction of
Well,
you.
thank
Anything
you.
else you want to say about yourself?
No, I guess the rest we can learn as we do the podcast. I think that's good. Thank you. Okay, Pastor Steph. Now, she goes by Pastor because she is one.
That's true.
Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it's not a moniker for some odd thing.
It's not a moniker.
It's an actual thing. So, Steph is pastor, co-lead pastor, is that still correct? Co-lead pastor of Mill City Church. You should check it out.
Yep.
She is an adjunct professor at Bethel University. And you particularly do teaching and training on preaching and communication, is that right?
Preaching and communication, mostly in the seminary, yeah.
Okay, so that's
Which is
awesome.
kind of pastor school seminary.
Married to JD.
Yep.
Do we call him filmmaker?
Yeah, filmmaker.
Filmmaker, good. Owner of Dog, Chaco.
Chaco. Yeah, we're dog parents.
They're
Let's
dog
just be
parents.
honest.
I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Loves boxing.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, and also as a leadership coach. You do some leadership coaching here and there as well.
Yeah, because I learned from you.
And author. We need to go speaker and author.
Yes. As we are recording this, the book is about to come out
So
officially.
you will hear a lot about that book soon.
Yeah.
But you'll have to come
I'm
back to
so
you.
excited. I'm so excited.
It's great. It's a great achievement to
Yeah.
put those thoughts down. It's really important.
And you're right, I do love boxing. You're really into running these days.
I am.
But I kind of want to coerce you into boxing.
I do like the idea of boxing.
Yeah.
I do.
And I hate the idea of running, so let's
Yeah.
not do that the opposite
Yeah,
way.
apparently that's never going to happen. So we take what we can. Boxing will be good.
So why don't you introduce our kickoff? So in each season, we often have a couple series. And so we never know, people. We never know for sure how many there'll be. But there's usually a few. And so would you be willing to kick off our first series of this season 7?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are a number of things going on at this time of year. And I often think there are a couple of points in the year when we kind of tune ourselves up as leaders or tune ourselves up in life. One is January, or the beginning of a new year.
Yeah, right.
You know, full of resolutions or whatever happens in your part of the world to kick off the new year. It's an intentional time. But another time I've noticed particularly in educational establishments and in churches, but I'm sure it's true for other organizations too, is that as you come to the end of what is our part of the world is the summer and kicks off into the fall,
right?
There's a reboot. So it revolves around the school year, basically. And whenever a new school year starts, it's a time to kick off and, you know, you're spending lots of money on supplies and all that kind of stuff because it's another time of new beginnings.
Yeah. And I love that, you know, technically, so you kept saying like in our part of the world, because in other parts of the world, it's not about to be fall.
It's winter in Australia or going,
But what I think is really cool is that there is also an opportunity to have that fresh start at any time.
Yes.
To have an opportunity to step into new things. So I totally agree with you. The new year, the new academic year, really prime opportunities. Yeah. But if you're listening to this and it's, you know, February 30, wait, how many days are there? 28. I love that I picked the month that doesn't have
1 month.
You had
one anyway.
It's February 28th, and you're going, oh, do I have to wait till the fall or to? No. If you resonate with it, if you resonate with what it looks like to have just a clean slate moment, a fresh start moment, a new level moment, a new whatever you want to call it. Don't wait for a calendar. If that makes
absolutely
sense.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, our series is called Level Up. Level Up. And we are wanting to look at and explore what it means to level up your leadership.
Yeah.
Because there is an aspect of our leadership which obviously relates to the people around us and who we're leading, but there is the whole area of self-leadership, what we can do to grow, what we can do to stretch ourselves, what we can do to step up in some ways. We've explored similar themes in the past, like maximizing, and that's making the most of a situation. But when we're talking about leveling up, it's taking a step forward.
Yeah.
It's choosing to take yourself to the next level of your leadership growth, wherever you are. Wherever you are, and whatever position you have, whether you consider yourself an aspiring leader, whether you consider yourself an emerging leader, whether you consider yourself established in your leadership, everybody can level up in some way.
Those are 3 helpful categories, I think, that you just gave of emerging, what did you say? Emerging, aspiring, emerging, and established.
Yeah.
And it is good to be in any of those spaces.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Those are an opportunity for you to just say, hey, where am I at and where do I want to go next?
Yeah.
And so we want this podcast to be a tool for people in all 3 of those categories of leadership.
And let me just qualify that we're not saying each of those things have a set period of time. You could have aspired for a long time, but there are life situations that determine it. You could be emerging into something, and it just takes time, you know. But I think they have particular distinctives.
I agree, and I think that there are seasons in life that are cyclical, where it's like if you're stepping into a new space as a leader, and you might have felt really established, but all of a sudden you're emerging in a new space. So for instance, I've been stepping into some different leadership spaces that are not exclusively religious. So there's people there who are of different faiths.
Yes.
Well, that is a new space for me.
Yeah.
So to say I'm an established leader in the church, well, that probably makes sense. But I'm emerging in some of these leadership spaces.
That's really good.
That are spiritual still, but we're, you know, and it's been really good for me as a person who loves Jesus, but also knows that Jesus loves all people. And what does it look like to get into relationships with people who are leaders who can really grow from what I've learned, and I can learn and grow from them, and I can also share with them my why, which is Jesus, you know. So that's kind of a cool way to think of it too, is that we're never, it's not a period at the end of that sentence.
Yeah, it's not, arriving isn't helpful.
No.
In that sense.
But those categories are helpful, so thanks for doing that. So, okay, so today we're going to kick off this Level Up Your Leadership with, I think, kind of like the place you have to start.
Yeah.
Which is identity.
Yeah, and I mean, identity, those of us who are familiar with it, I mean, I'm always talking about identity.
Well, yeah, it's necessary.
And I get caught sometimes between thinking, is this a really introspective topic? And do you just need to get on and do it anyway? And don't spend so much time navel gazing. And I certainly think you can spend too much time navel
gazing?
That's a thing.
That's process.
But you can spend too much time looking inward.
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes that you can spend too little time checking inward. You know, and just checking in on certain things.
And as the environment externally changes, there's things happening within you that are new to explore.
Yeah, like you gave the example of recognizing that you've been an established leader and now you're emerging into new spaces. It's good to to have a check on things in terms of what our assumptions are, what our vulnerabilities are, what our weaknesses are.
What's going on in there as that happens.
And so I think as we are wanting to level up in our leadership and level up the leaders that we are and are becoming, then identity is always a great place to start.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm always brought to when thinking of identity is the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And the stories that have been told about us and the stories that life has told us.
Yeah.
And I think as I'm pondering this and as we're launching this season, the thing I want us to consider is whether the stories we're telling ourselves are true. Because if they're not true, what are the stories we're telling ourselves about our leadership?
Yeah.
Basically, is what I want to be asking.
Yeah.
I want us to ask ourselves at this point.
I think that's a great question. And the way we arrive at those narratives is diverse. So it could be somebody else who snuck that idea of that story in there. It could be from your own experiences, circumstances. I think sometimes the story we tell ourselves is because we have a lack of a ability to see a greater story. So when we talk about the Elderman quote, "You can't be what you can't see," sometimes the story we tell ourselves is, well, I'm just blank because we've never seen someone like us do something. So there's lots of ways. I mean, are there other ways that you would say these stories become kind of the chosen narrative, almost without our permission?
Yeah, I think we're not always, and story is, I mean, in some ways just is the language we're using, but I think we're not always sure of the stories that are being written all the time. You know, when life happens, I think sometimes we can say, you know, I'm somebody at home, I'm somebody else at work. Yeah. So we don't think about how a disappointment at home can affect how we lead at work.
Yeah.
We don't think of how something that's happening in the wider culture can produce a level of insecurity that is impacting the way that we lead,
right,
in some way. But seeing the bigger story helps us again check in to say, is that bigger story of what's happening in my city, what's happening in my nation, what's happening in my culture amongst my generation, is that a lens through which I'm seeing something? Is that the mirror through which I'm seeing myself?
Yeah.
How is that impacting the way that I'm leading?
Yeah, that's so good. Because there isn't really an option for there not to be a narrative. Like that, there's going to be a story.
There's always stories. You just got to work out whether it's true.
Yeah. Okay, so before you say maybe how we would start to work that out, can you share an example of kind of what that's looked like for you? Maybe not even super specifically, but to reflect back and say, what are the stories and are they true? Is there any way that you could kind of illustrate that?
I think one of the ones I'm often thinking, and it's an ongoing one that I revisit, is at different ages. At 20, am I too young for this? At 30, am I too young or old for this? Yeah. Now in my 40s, is it too late for this? And when I'm thinking of taking on a new leadership project, trying something, am I too old? Yeah. Is it too late? Yeah. I think it's probably more the thing I've been asking myself recently, or I've realized is the story that I'm hearing. Yeah. Whether I believe it or not, that's the question that has sometimes made me second guess things and has made me pause or slow down on things. And it's ironic because different cultures have different assessments on readiness in accordance with age.
Right.
And I'm from two cultures, one which is Nigerian, which really values age.
That's right, yeah.
And then being born and raised in the UK, but living here, where I would say the West really does like youth.
Well, I've actually been reading a little bit about this one guy named Andy Root, who's a theologian. He talks about the idol of youth and just this almost worship of being young.
Yeah.
And how dominant American culture, it really is kind of oriented around youthfulness. And like you said, actually other cultures elevate the wisdom of their elders and the people who have experience. And I mean, you can see some both and there. Yeah. But when you have cultures that become myopic like that, where it's so focused on the young, for instance, or youthfulness, or what that means, are we telling ourselves stories that are actually not helpful or not true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so then as I'm thinking of what it means to level up, I have to challenge those stories.
Yeah.
And actually at every point in my life where I've had to think, looking back, when I've started out in leadership, I've had to challenge the story, and not to say that so when I was 20, I had plenty to learn.
Yeah.
So was I too young on some things? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably I didn't have the experience because life hadn't afforded me enough of those experiences yet. But that didn't mean I had to disqualify myself from certain things. I just had to recognize that there was a long journey ahead.
Right.
And now was a time for growth and investment and things like that. As I consider leveling up now, and I'm confronted with my identity and the stories I tell myself, I have to challenge again the story and say, okay, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. Am I saying I'm too old to try? Am I needing to recontextualize the ideas that are coming to my mind? Am I dealing with life in terms of the age of my children and what their priorities need to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I just need to make sure I don't assume the stories.
Yeah.
I don't assume that because I'm a certain age and a woman, because again, those things are gendered as well, that there are certain things which are off limits.
Yeah, right. I actually think a lot of people kind of in our community here, Lead Stories community, have mentioned that feeling of it's too late. Like when you said that, I think a lot of people have resonated with that question of, oh, it's too late. I wish I would have started when I was younger. I wish I knew that I was a leader earlier, or I wish I knew I could be intentional with my influence. And and that is a real, that can really be paralyzing.
Yeah, because I think regret tells a story.
Yeah.
Regret and disappointment tells a strong story.
Yeah.
And if we don't allow that unprocessed grief to kind of come out and have its work, then it just defines us. It's too late. Yeah,
I think that's maybe a really core takeaway from today, is that there is a story. It's not neutral. There's no, you're telling yourself something about yourself.
Yeah.
Your identity is being shaped. Your understanding of who you are and where you've come from, your narrative, your story is there. If you don't attend to it, then it's going to end up being by default. And by default, for most of us, means that someone else, something else is telling us who we are, besides our intentional look at ourselves and asking what God's opinion is of who we are.
Yeah.
And truly receiving our identity as it's in motion, as it's being formed.
Yeah.
It's not, like you said earlier, it's not I have now gotten to the point where I understand my identity, period, at the end of that sentence. I think there's sometimes ellipses moments where it's, I think maybe this about myself, ... And then there's times where it's maybe a comma or a semicolon because there's kind of been a hard stop.
Yeah.
But the idea that I have now achieved an understanding of my identity, or this is who I am. Whenever, and I'm guilty of this too, of saying something like, I remember hearing somebody once say, well, I'm just an anxious person. And I thought, well, that's an interesting.
Wow, that's definitive.
That was very definitive.
Yeah,
and I said, well, who told you that? That's the kind of conversation we had. And so we dug into it from there. And, other people and her own experiences had told her that she had taken an experience that she has, which is anxiety, which many people have, and put it in place as part of her identity.
Wow.
And she didn't realize she'd been doing that. But every time she spoke those words, she was reinforcing.
Yeah.
I am. It's a fraction of an inch from saying I am anxiety. I am that. That's what I am.
And anxiety is me. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I feel like was being said. And I say that with no judgment. I think that we are often doing that. We are often taking something we deal with, struggle with, wonder about, and make it who we are, when it's really either a role we play.
Yeah.
Or an opportunity we have, or just actually an untrue label.
Yeah. And it's important that we understand the the impact it has, because this lens determines our leadership.
Yes.
So
yes.
We haven't even started. Oh,
the lights went off.
The lights went off.
Well,
which is great for us, but for the video,
it's also great for energy.
Yeah.
It's also great for energy.
So for those of you who are listening, we are in a room where the lights turn themselves off at any given moment, without warning, unless someone moves around. So as soon as we're back with you. And we're back with you.
Around the room.
And hopefully this won't happen again in the next 5
You probably will.
minutes, but it might. So where was I? I guess for me, what I'm reminded of when I'm thinking of leveling up our leadership is we do not lead beyond what we think. And so this impacts vision, this impacts intentions, this impacts risk, creativity, all of these things. Because we could just say, level up your leadership by being curious, by taking risks. All of those things are true. Yeah. And we'll come to that as some of our solutions and ways forward. It's just that if we don't know why, when we struggle to do those things, what's going on, if we don't know that it's important to rewrite the story, we won't get to the get a vision. We won't get to the get creative, start exploring, taking risks. Sometimes there are things to dismantle before you can build.
And I think as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking what these stories that aren't true are doing are placing artificial limits on who we think we are, who we think we can be, and what we think we can be about. So if there's a limit, then leveling up is going to hit a ceiling, a wall, whatever illustration you want to use, because there is a perception of a limit. I'm just a blank. I'm just a manager. I'm not a leader. I'm just a mom. I'm just a parent. Whenever the word just is in there, that's a sneaky little hint that there's an artificial limit. Yeah. And living into limitless leadership and leveling up is going to be pretty difficult when there's limits that are there that maybe should not be there. Yeah, or that can still be put in perspective. It's like, okay, so you are a mom raising young children, and there are certain things realistically because your motherhood is a priority to you that you are unable to do. Yeah. So maybe you are not going to do a degree which takes you away. You're not going to do a degree on the other side of the country. It affects your decisions. But that doesn't mean you might not want to take a class. Or that this time is wasted. Yeah, totally. I mean, being a parent of small children might be one of the best leadership lessons. Oh my gosh. Because you learn how to explain things very simply and clearly. and again. Yeah, patience. And again. Yeah. Oh and man, again. I can't. Yeah, bless all of you out there listening right now with anybody that's either a toddler or a preteen. That's the two groups I'm feeling the most called to bless right now in the name of Jesus. Because what? The pastor has spoken. Yes. I mean, because what are you doing? Small child. Like, do you understand, Sid, because the question, like, do you understand what I'm saying, is a genuine one when you're talking to a child. Yeah. But turns out, as a leader, sometimes, does everybody understand what I'm saying? It's still a very good question. You think you're communicating really clearly. Yeah, but it's not. Ain't. Yeah, it turns out. So, anyway, I think that those limits, those artificial limits, is part of what you're suggesting we need to name. I think we need to name, and then we need to begin to think how we explore something different. Because I'm not saying let's pretend the stories aren't there, because we can't. Right. It's just that you get to turn the page and write more chapters to this story that is your life. Yeah. And it may be that it's time to turn the page. Mm-hmm. It may be that it's time to turn the page, and we can do that by I love questions. I think questions get at things which are unconscious. Yeah. That we aren't always, either life is too busy or we are in denial and can't access. So common ones like, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Yeah. Are great things to begin to think about what you're trying to get at. Yeah. I think curiosity can birth the creativity that helps us level up. Any sentence that starts with, I wonder about, I'm wondering about, whether it's an area of study, a career, and a skill that you have or want to have, an idea that's on a loop and comes around every few months. Yeah. And what's that idea that won't go away? And maybe it's gone away for a little while because you pushed it down somewhere. Yeah, or life happened again, the stories. But also, I think for those who are like, I don't even know where to begin, and we've mentioned this in previous series. This is where things in terms of your identity, getting other people in, whether it's friends who have seen you succeed in areas of your life, whether it's using tools and resources, those personality studies,
that may serve a purpose. They don't do it for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have used them, in which case it's another label.
Yeah.
But I think if they can help dig,
yeah,
if they can help carve this path towards helping you explore,
yeah,
they're tools worth using.
Okay, so let's do a takeaway for people. I want to suggest that, and we'll put this in the show notes, but I want to suggest that people pull out a journal or whatever you do. It can be some people take journaling notes on their phone or on their computer or whatever, and write down these questions. And let's give people some questions to just take into their journaling time. And you could answer all the questions, or you could say which question resonates with you the most. And then take those questions and those initial thoughts. Maybe you're somebody who journals long form, or maybe you just do some jotting down some bullet points. Take that to a conversation process partner. And I mean, ideally, encourage somebody else to answer the same questions, and then you get together and talk about them. So let's name some of those questions. The first one that you just said was, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Yeah. I think that would probably be my first one. What are you really good at?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can make it simple. What are the skills and the talents and the resources that you bring to your table, as it were?
Yeah. What about just saying, what are some of the stories I'm telling about who I am? And then next question, where did those stories come from?
Yeah.
And are they true? What makes them feel true? What makes them feel untrue? What's going on there? Jotting down just what resonates with you about that.
And I would take note of the people who have encouraged you.
Yeah. Who are
the people around you who encourage you to level up? We'll come back to things around other people eventually, but that'll be helpful.
Who are the people that help reinforce the false limits? Who are those people? You don't have to show this to anybody. You don't have to name them necessarily, but you need to know. You need to name it and say, these folks, this, or maybe it's a space that you're in that reinforces your artificial limits.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you need to automatically not be in that space, but indecision's still a decision. If you don't pay attention to the fact that if you choose not to decide, I'm going to be aware of that, you can decide to be aware, or if you don't decide, the decision you're making is, this will influence my identity without my permission.
Yeah.
So who doesn't? What other questions would you add?
I think I would come back to one more. The only other question I'd ask, and it's more to the things that we said at the beginning, in terms of where would you place yourself on your leadership journey? Would you say aspiring, emerging, or established? And the reason why I'm encouraging us to do that is because I think some of those stories might play into those bits.
Yeah.
And also because as we go in this series together, it'll be useful to come back to some of those things.
Right, great, good. So we'll write those questions down in the show notes. But here's the goal for all of this, is that you would be able to take note of where you are. Because as we go on in the series talking about leveling up your leadership, it's hard to know where you need to go if you can't name where you are now. Yeah. We often talk about that. There's a lot of diagnostic tools that we have, resources. And in fact, we kind of have a lot of different tools on our website, and actually a few of them on YouTube too already. That are diagnostic tools. So you can check those out. But I think simply just to take that space, there's so much power in saying, I'm going to take an hour to sit down with those questions and actually have some space to do that. You might have to fight for that right now, depending on what's going on in your life. You might need to fight for some time alone, or maybe you're more extroverted, so you need to be at a coffee shop where there's people around you to just stay present to what you're doing. Whatever, just do it so that you are in a spot where you're able to say, here's where I'm at, so that we can start talking about what would leveling up look like for you, which is what the rest of the series is going to be.
That's good.
I'm excited. This is going to be good.
Good stuff. Well, welcome everybody.
Welcome to season 7. We're glad you're here. We're glad to be here. And we will talk to you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Now you've got to turn it off. Hi, YouTube friends. Bye, YouTube friends. Maybe we should have an extra minute on YouTube.
Oh, should we? Let's do it.
Oh, that was me thinking out loud and not actually.
Hi, YouTube friends.
Welcome. If you had an extra minute, what would you like us to talk about? I think rather than us say foolishness, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe a question that came from you that we could answer. Maybe a little slot. Let us know and
put that in the comments. Below the video. Tell us, hey, if we were gonna get a little extra feature, what would you love to hear? What would you love us to expound on? Maybe check out the other episodes so you know the kind of stuff that we typically talk about. But we would love to give you an extra minute. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's how we make decisions around here. We were like, let's do it. Okay.
Here we are. Right, now we're done.
Bye.